Hi guys, and welcome back to the CineChat channel. I'm Nick White, and as always, I'm joined by Declan McKinney.
Hello.
Today we have something a bit different, as we would like to cover some slightly smaller topics that don't fit our usual podcast format. The point of discussion today is going to be what makes a perfect sequel, and we've devised a sort of recipe to go along with this. So we'll jump straight in at what I think can be described as the perfect sequel in Blade Runner 2049.
Yeah, so Blade Runner obviously came out this year and it's done extremely well critically, but the same cannot be said about its commercial success. The movie has not done well at all, which is a shame considering how absolutely balls up incredible it was.
Mm,
Um, and also the fact that the budget was very high and they're not exactly or not remotely making money back. I actually read something today that apparently the film has cost them like 80 million or something
wow,
because of the amount it cost and the amount of money they made back, which that is a huge loss,
that's
um,
shocking.
which is a shame. But money aside, when you the actual film itself was mind blowing, and it is in both of our heads the perfect sequel. I mean, it really is. I actually think it's better than the first Blade Runner personally. I enjoy it more than the first Blade Runner.
Yeah,
Uh, I don't know if it's just because I actually watched the first Blade Runner a couple of days before I watched 2049, and I mean I love the first Blade Runner. Like I loved it when I watched it. I watched which one did I watch? I got the Blu-ray here. Which one was it? It was the final cut I've seen,
mm,
um, and I loved it. I thought it was absolutely fantastic, absolutely amazing film, super immersive. And then the sequel, 2049, really built upon that world, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, what are your opinions on 2049? Because I think it's truly tremendous.
yeah. I think in terms of, like we say, in a sequel, I love the first Blade Runner, as you said, but I think this one sort of took it up a notch. It kind of expanded on the first one's brilliantly set up world and concepts. But I think the thing that made Blade Runner 2049 such a such a monumental film in critically, like you were saying, is the cinematography was just unbelievable. Like some of the shots and the
Yeah,
scenes were absolutely mind blowing. It was a film like that that really staked the claim to go and watch films at the cinema and experience them on the big screen, fully immersive sound, just a real testament to film. And obviously, like you're saying, it's not done too well commercially, which is a shame. But you do often find that how a film is received critically doesn't always mean that it's going to guarantee to be a box office success. And it's also the other way around. Films that don't seem to do too well review wise end up absolutely raking it in. Um,
yeah,
but I think
yeah,
Ryan
that's true.
Gosling, again, terrific actor. Um, I think
Oh,
he's
I absolutely love him.
yeah, I think he's terrific. I think um, he is one of those actors that struggles to do wrong in my eyes because I think he
Yeah,
always is at the top of his game. Um, and I think Jared Leto's kind of suffered again in terms of his screen time. See, he was made out to be this villain, and he was not in it really. I think I remember seeing him like three or
reminds
four
me of another
scenes.
movie.
Sorry,
That really reminds me of another film with Jared Leto where he was supposed to be the villain, but he was barely in it. Can't
Suicide
remember what it
Squad,
was now.
by any chance?
That was the one. Yeah, that was the one. Hmm.
Again, we always seem to get back on to Suicide Squad. Um,
We always talk about DC, no matter what.
we
We
do,
always come back to DC.
we do. But yeah,
Oh dear. Let's
again,
just end.
yeah. But I think that's a shame as well because I think as an actor he's brilliant. It's a shame
Yes,
he's
yeah.
just never
Brilliant.
really utilised properly. Um, and then obviously with Harrison Ford's cameo again, that really sort of was nice to see him step back into another familiar role, as is what he's been doing for the last few years anyway. Um, but I think,
Harrison Ford really impressed me actually
mm,
because, like, I think he really gave it his all. I think
mm,
coming back as Deckard, because I think in Star Wars: The Force Awakens, where he came back as Han Solo, although he was amazing in it, you could tell his heart wasn't completely in
Yeah,
it because I don't know if you know this, but he wanted to die in Episode 6. He wanted Han Solo to be killed, and they didn't. And the only reason he came back to Episode 7 was because they said they'd kill him off.
yeah,
Um,
I read that too.
so yeah, you could tell that he was just kind of there so his character could be killed, basically.
Yeah,
But that moment, that doesn't take away anything from how good that moment was.
no,
You know,
definitely not. And I think I actually preferred, and obviously the first film was about him, but I actually preferred his character in 2049 because you could tell that he'd seen some dark things, and he's sort of, I don't know how to explain it properly, but he's like his emotion was just carried on through that film, and obviously with the payoff at the end as well. I don't know. I really enjoyed the version of Deckard in this film.
I like the fact as well they didn't because there's obviously enigma with
Mm,
his character in the first film in terms of whether he's a replicant or whether he's not.
mm,
And I like the fact they don't answer it in the second one. I know a lot of people really wanted to find out because obviously it's a mystery that's been going on for 30 years now.
yeah,
Uh, but I quite like the fact that it doesn't, because it just kind of keeps it going. It just gives you more hints towards both. Um, I'd say 2049 probably swings towards more that he is than he isn't, um, just in terms of how they dealt with the character of Rachel. Um, but I still think that mystery was kept, and that was really well done. I think that was a good decision on their part.
yeah, exactly. Um, I think it's quite good to keep them guessing as well, because obviously, if you flat out answer a question that's been around for 30 years, that'll still piss people off no matter what answer you gave,
Yeah,
whether he was or he wasn't. So I think still keeping it sort of closed, like you say, is I think a very smart move to make. Um, but obviously, talking about Blade Runner, what we consider to be perfect sequel, what does define a good sequel? That's something that I think Hollywood has struggled with for a long time,
mm, yeah.
and that's something that we're hopefully going to
I
try and
think
answer
that.
now.
I think yeah. So there are a couple other sort of films that I sort of want to talk about. We'll just run through these quickly. That another film that came out this year was Kingsman: The Golden Circle, which Kingsman: The Secret Service is one of my favorite films of all time.
As is
I
mine.
I've watched it so many times, I can't get enough of it. It's just so fun, and I was so excited for Kingsman 2. I think Kingsman 2 was my most anticipated film of this year, even more than Star Wars. Um, I was so excited for it,
Yeah,
and I wasn't disappointed. And I know a lot of people were, and that's a big talking point here that we're trying to discuss because some people did really enjoy the Golden Circle, like me and Nick. Some people didn't, and it's because, to be fair, it didn't really do much to build upon the Kingsman franchise. I mean, it kind of did, and they tried to build upon the world by introducing the Statesman,
yeah.
which was a cool addition. I like the Statesman a lot, even though most of them were barely in it. Something I want to point out is the fact that Channing Tatum was really marketed as a big character in the film.
Yeah,
He's barely in it. And what's funny as well is that Elton John actually has more screen time.
yeah. Oh
I
god,
do
yeah,
find
that's
that
true,
quite.
isn't it? Wow.
But to be fair, I think he was filming Logan Lucky at the time, in which he is the main character in that.
Ah,
So I guess that's fair enough.
I could say you could tell
The
that.
time scales around the same.
Yeah, I could say you could tell that they had to film around his schedule, in terms of like when he was actually in the film and where he fit into the story. He was obviously, oh, he could be on set
Yeah,
this day, right? We'll have him with this bit. Oh, he could be on the set this day. I will have him with this bit. Oh no, he's going to be out for the rest of the month. I will just freeze him. Great.
yeah. We'll put him part of the disease thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, Kingsman is a good example of a film that I think everyone wanted a sequel. Um, it wasn't exactly one that I don't think they forced it out. I think that's the wrong way to say it. But they didn't exactly do much to make it a bolder sequel than it could have been.
Hmm.
But I still really enjoyed it, and I will defend it. I think it's brilliant.
Oh yeah,
I
me
just had
too.
so much fun with it.
I'd probably argue that the action in the second one was better than the first one. I mean, obviously apart from the church scene, because
Yeah,
you can always bring it back to
yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
being probably the best action scene in film. Period. Um, but I think there was a lot more action in the second one, but none of it was poor. Like it was all really, really good.
Yeah, I think like the scene where it's at the end where it's Eggsy and Harry fighting to Elton John with Saturday Night's Alright for Fighting playing in the
Yep.
back. That was an amazing action scene.
Yeah.
And also, I think the opening one as well with Eggsy in the taxi with fighting Charlie. I thought that was a pretty good fight as well because that had a with Prince, "Let's Go Crazy," which is an
Yeah.
amazing song.
I think the
Um,
music and the action was always really good in terms of how it fit together as well.
yeah,
In Kingsman. Um,
like the scene in the first Kingsman where it's I don't know what the song's called, but you know the one where he's fighting the Sophia Batella's character and there's that like really happy party song playing and Samuel Jackson's just stood in the room laughing.
yeah.
That makes me cry. It's so funny.
But even
So another franchise just oh, yeah, sorry.
I was gonna say even the fight at the very end of Golden Circle where Words Up, that version of Word Up's playing.
Yeah, yeah,
That's great.
yeah,
I love that.
yeah. So another quick one is Star Wars. Obviously, Star Wars is probably the biggest film franchise in the world. Um, sort of the progression there, you can look at the original trilogy and look at the first movie, and it was a very light kind of adventure film. Obviously, probably the most influential film in the history of film. And then The Empire Strikes Back came out, and it was a lot darker. And that was a good shift because, in terms of what they wanted to do with the story, they wanted to make the Empire a bit more of a empowering force. They wanted to make it a bit more intimidating. And because they had a loss in the first film, they were, to use a pun, they were striking back. And so The Empire Strikes Back, it had a lot more of a darker tone to it. And that worked. And then, continuing on with that, with with the Force Awakens, compared to the Last Jedi, it's kind of like Blade Runner, where it was a sequel that was so many years apart. I mean, obviously we had the prequels, but in terms of the story, it was that many years apart, in around sort of 30 years. And
Yeah.
the way that they brought back certain characters, like again, Harrison Ford was brought back as Han Solo. He was really good in it. I mean, obviously I had some issues, but anyway, he was still great. And the way they managed to tie in the new characters who we got in The Force Awakens into the old ones and tie it into the old story, that is what made that much the more beneficial to them, as they could really build upon that, and I really like that. So Force Awakens is another great idea there.
Yeah, exactly. And I think what you were saying about Star Wars, we were having a sort of conversation before we started recording this, that I think that didn't set out to become the powerhouse that it is
No,
today. And I think the whole fan base that it's produced has enabled it to have such a huge background in terms of like their expanded universe and the comics and TV shows and all that. I mean, I appreciate most of that now is null and void since Disney took over Lucasfilm. But even so, there's the fact that people were able to set up an entire universe based off just one original trilogy, I think is mind blowing. And the fact that that now constantly leaves the door open for films, for TV shows, for books, to just constantly keep going. I don't think we're going to see the end of Star Wars anytime soon. Obviously, I know they've got the trilogy to finish and another couple of sort of spin-off films, but I think even way past that, we're going to keep seeing Star Wars forever. I think.
yeah, it'll never die.
No.
Um, but I think what's good about Star Wars is just kind of a tangent here. Just that I think they will give us quite significant breaks in between each sort of trilogy.
Mm.
Maybe we'll get standalone films in between to fill the gaps, but um, I think those breaks will help because it's not going to be bombardment. Because at the moment we are kind of getting bombardment of Star Wars movies at the minute. Every year we're getting one,
I think.
and even though they are different, it's not sequel after sequel after sequel.
Yeah.
It's we are getting the standalone films. It's still a bit. I love it though. I mean, as a
It,
fan, Star Wars Christmas, it's great.
I could say as a sort of Star Wars fanboy as such, it's kind of the golden era of Star Wars, isn't it? Because you're not waiting years for your next fix because, like you say, we've got a film every year, um, and it's great.
So the first sort of little talking point with what makes a good sequel is kind of similar to why the reason we sort of wanted to talk about films like Blade Runner and Star Wars Episode 7 was we're going to start by talking about films that are sequels that come out, years, decades after the original, or after the last movie, and that's what a good thing. So I think a reason Star Wars Episode 7 was a good one to bring up is because they always go in a new direction. You need a new direction, fresh faces, and you want to have callbacks to the original, and you want to have fan moments for the original, but don't depend on the original to give you this story necessarily. You want to have these new characters. So like in Episode 7, obviously we have a completely new cast. We have Rey played by Daisy Ridley, we have Finn played by John Boyega, and we have Poe Dameron played by Oscar Isaac. And all those characters are great.
Yeah,
All three of them, absolutely brilliant. And their individual characters and their individual stories were really interesting. Like Rey, obviously she has a huge mystery surrounding her that we still don't know the answer to. About how she was just kind of left on Jakku, and she's a scavenger. She's kind of been living there all her life just to survive.
yeah,
Finn was the one I was definitely most interested about going in because he's a stormtrooper,
yeah.
a defected stormtrooper. That was something we'd never really seen before in Star Wars.
I would say we'd
So
never
that was really
seen.
cool. And then Poe Dameron.
Yeah, so never seen a stormtrooper without the helmet on. So the fact that he was the first one
Yeah,
to really sort of rebel was a huge thing, and a very interesting character, like you say. The one that I was also most excited about too.
yeah,
Um, Sorry, I continue about Blood Armor as well.
yeah. He was just a badass,
Yeah,
like just straight up. He's a bit more of the Han Solo character in this one.
definitely.
Uh, But then they had callbacks to the original, like obviously bringing back Han Solo was amazing, bringing back Chewie. We also see Leia, and even though Luke's not in it much, obviously, he is still in it. But we're obviously going to see him a lot more in Episode 8 and
Mm.
9. But yeah, I think those callbacks to the original, and like I said earlier, the way that some of the characters linked back into the original didn't necessarily depend on it, but it was just a cool thing. So like the main villain of this trilogy, or one of the main villains, Kylo Ren, we find out is actually Ben Solo, the son of Han and Leia. It's cool little moments like that, and it's just that was a really great link, a really great way to tie everything together without necessarily because you didn't even need Han Solo necessarily in that film to make that as impactful as it was.
No,
The fact that he was there to be killed, added to it, and that was a really emotional scene and a really shocking scene because I didn't see that twist coming and I didn't see the kill coming either.
no.
Um, and both of those together was like an incredibly impactful moment. Like my jaw was dropped.
I think that scene for me was even more impressive because I think I've seen The Force Awakens like almost double digits, and that scene is incredible because he's stood talking to Kylo Ren, and the light on the right hand side of his face is blue,
Yeah, I was going
and
to bring this up.
and obviously for Kylo Ren, he's sort of got the white light, and then as he walks forward, and it cuts to red, and then his lightsaber comes on, and just that whole scene in terms of how it was set up as well as how it looked was just, I thought, probably one of the best scenes in Star Wars. I would go as far to say
Yeah.
it was great.
And this other point kind of goes back more to Blade Runner, which is where you take an already established world and build upon it. And this is something that's very important when doing a film that's set, 30 years after the original or so, where we already know what this world is. We know, when you look at Blade Runner, we know how this world works. We know the systems. But then this is 30 years on, so the world's progressed, and we need to see that progression. And in Blade Runner is a good example because we see that. We see how the replicants have become more advanced, they have become more intelligent, more capable, and then we also see how perhaps laws have changed. And because Blade Runner is quite a political film underneath the
Mm.
surface in terms of some of the themes that it goes into, and we see how even those themes have progressed over 30 years. And that is a key thing about doing these sequels years apart is you need to show how this world has changed in real time.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, and I think that's what Blade Runner did masterfully.
I think obviously I know we're talking about Blade Runner, but just a point that I'd like to raise now is same with Jumanji film that's coming out this year. Um, like
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
set years, obviously after the first one. The first one was great, but that has changed a hell of a lot because instead of
yeah.
the game coming for you, you're going now into the game, and it's obviously taken the original theme of it and flipped it on the complete reverse. And I appreciate it's not as dramatic or as lore heavy as a film like Blade Runner, for example, but still it'll be interesting to see how that change will affect that film as a, I could say as a franchise, but it's not even a franchise, is it really? Um, but it's going to be interesting to see how that works.
I like as well with Jumanji that the original's a board game, and now it's a video game,
Mm.
bringing it into the modern era. That's really cool. I mean, they didn't even need to do that, but that was just kind of a cool little touch to show. Yeah,
Yeah,
this world's evolved.
yeah,
So
exactly.
they were kind of just some thoughts for films that are set, decades after. But what about sequels that are kind of like your average sequel, where you get them 2, 3, 4 years after the first one or after the last film that came out in the franchise, something like Kingsman? I think the first point is kind of going on the last point there, which was again sense of progression. You need to show what's going on, how these characters have progressed. And me and Nick were talking about before we started recording this. A good example, recent example, would be the character of Doctor Strange in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. In his first standalone film, you see how he is still an amateur student, really. He doesn't really know what he's doing. But then you see him in Thor Ragnarok as a cameo, and you can see how he's absolutely mastered the magical elements. And even though that wasn't a Doctor Strange movie remotely, it was just a cameo. You can even see just how that character has progressed throughout the years. Um, have they said how long Doctor Strange takes place? Because I have a feeling it's a sense of years, but then in the film they never say they never say when it takes place within the wider context of the MCU. Because I'm really confused with that.
Um,
I'm waiting for them to release this.
yeah, well, don't talk to anyone about MCU timelines because you'll start an entire mass brawl. Um, but I don't know. I think things with Marvel films, they always try to take place in the year that they're released, unless stated otherwise. Um, but I think, yeah, okay. But um, with Doctor Strange, I think they kind of got away with it being a bit more confusing because where he goes to learn his skills, am I right in thinking that that place is frozen in time, or am I getting that completely mixed up with um, somewhere else?
I don't think that place is no. I
No.
mean, I know because I think you're thinking of like the mirror dimension. I'm pretty sure that play. I'm pretty sure that's
Oh,
frozen in time.
okay.
Um, but I'm not having that he sort of spent all of his magical training inside the
Yeah, I
mirror dimension
suppose.
because that's only one element of the magic really that he
True.
can do. Um, very cool though.
Mm.
So the next point is stay true to the lore and elements. You've got to kind of stick to what made the original so great. You've got to stick to those foundations because you don't want the movie to go so far in a different direction that it doesn't even feel like the original anymore. But then you don't want to stick so close to it where it feels samey. Um, and I think that's what this is trying to say is staying true to the lore is making sure that the foundations and I guess you could say the rules that you set up
Yeah.
in the first film are well regarded and kept going forward. And I think that is definitely one of the best things when it comes to these sequels is just making sure that it all feels consistent.
Yeah, I'd say so. I think um, there's nothing wrong with changing the tone of a film. Because obviously we spoke about this in our most recent episode of our podcast, which if you haven't watched, go check that out. Little plug. Um, but Thor Ragnarok was a completely different direction to the other Thor films that we've seen. But obviously it kept all the history of Thor there. It was just a different take on the character. So I think that worked in that regard. And I think that film did so well with that point because I don't think it would have been quite as successful if they tried to do the same film, but with the Thor that we're used to seeing on screen. So I think in that respect, it shows that sometimes you can get away with sort of changing things a little bit, but you obviously don't want to set too far away.
Yeah. Have you watched Thor a second time yet?
Not yet, no. I'm hoping to go this weekend, but I'm not too
So,
sure.
I think it's better the second time. I
Really?
mean, you probably saw me on Twitter going on about it, but
Yeah.
it's actually I'm going to say it's my favorite film in the MCU now.
Oh well.
It's just so fun. It's just like, honestly, I mean, obviously, I won't go into it because we did a whole episode. Again, check it out.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's just I think it's better the second time. So you were talking about tone a minute ago, and that's the next point: is tonal shifts. Because going back to Star Wars, the first film in comparison to Empire Strikes Back is much darker. It's a lot more of a. You can clearly see how much of a darker film it is, and a good point with The Empire Strikes Back is the ending. Like the ending is just, you know, nobody's happy, everything's gone wrong. Han Solo's in the carbonite, and it's a cliffhanger. And it was a completely different thing. And I looked at fan reactions back in the 80s when that came out, and people didn't like The Empire Strikes Back when it came out. People were saying it was just, it was kind of like just this weird twist. Nobody kind of expected this tonal difference. Nobody expected the cliffhanger because people weren't used to this. People weren't used to this sort of thing in films. It just wasn't a thing. It wasn't because films were just a very clean cut kind of beginning, middle, end.
Mm.
Whereas this was like, oh, you're gonna have to wait to the next one, and that was a 3 year gap. So it was like this massive thing, and people didn't like it. And you can understand why. If it was kind of like the first time this ever happened, you'd be like, "What is this?" Um, and tonal shift, I think that's definitely what The Empire Strikes Back did so well. And I think that's definitely a good point. Is you kind of like what I said earlier, you don't want to stray too far from the direction to make it feel like it's a completely different film, but you don't want to keep it so similar that it becomes boring and it doesn't feel like it's gone anywhere.
Yeah.
Because even though Thor Ragnarok was a completely different direction, I mean, the franchise needed that. It just needed that boost of energy.
Mm.
But when you look at the first two Thor films, Thor and Thor: The Dark World, those tones were so similar that the films kind of felt interchangeable, more than the same.
Mm. Yeah, I think another thing to look at as well is I'm going to be talking about Marvel a lot here, but Guardians of the Galaxy, like those two films
Yeah,
not samey, but they kind of kept what worked and worked with that. Obviously with the music and the humour and that whole kind of thing. But as sequels go, I didn't think it was awful because I enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed the first one. Um, but they didn't change too much in terms of its tone. But they didn't need to because they'd already set up enough in the first film for you to care about this group of characters.
yeah. Also, with Guardians 2, you've just made me think about this now. Is Guardians 2 wasn't necessarily darker, but it had a lot more of a serious story going for it,
Mm,
with a lot more heart and emotion, with obviously bringing in Peter Quill's father.
true.
And that was kind of like what we're saying. It wasn't in a completely different direction because, like you say, it kept the humor and it kept the music, the things that defined Guardians of the Galaxy and the reasons why we loved it in the first place. But then it added an extra level of depth to the characters in the world, where you were like, oh, this is just expanding on the world. And that's why I think that's the best thing about Guardians 2 as a sequel. Although I didn't absolutely love it like I did the first one, I still really enjoyed it. It's still a great film.
Yeah.
Um, I think it just didn't. Anyway, we'll move on from that. So we spoke enough about Marvel last week,
We have, yeah.
and on this podcast. And this last point we're going to go through is, if you're going to do a sequel, make sure it's justified. Make sure there is a story to tell, whether you set this up in the first one or, you actually have an original story that you want to tell. then that's fine. But don't just do a sequel because the first one did well and you wanna just make a sequel to make a cash grab because that's not good. That's not good for the film.
No.
I mean, good business, yes, but and that's why we get so many sequels that we don't really need or want, such as the Transformers films. Um, but it's just, I think Blade Runner. That film came out in 1982, I want
To
to say,
yeah,
and then the sequel came out in 2017. 35 years later, and
it's a long
did I get my
time.
maths right there?
Yeah, that's right.
Something
That's right.
like that. But that film was completely justified because we had a new character with Ryan Gosling's Officer K, and then that linked back into Harrison Ford's character, who was of course the protagonist of the first one, and it was an original story and one that deserved to be told, and that's why it worked so well. And that's, I think, the thing that all film studios need to keep in mind when doing sequels is this necessary? Is it justified?
Yeah, because I
And if
think
you can answer yes to that, then go for it.
I mean, like you said about cash grab, like look at the Fast and Furious franchise. I'm not saying it's a bad thing because I think some of those films are quite fun. They're very, they're at that point now where they're all the same, to be honest.
Yeah,
But I
I
think,
enjoy it.
oh no, I'm not saying that as a bad thing because they are easy to watch and you know what you're getting out of them. And at the end of the day, they're really well put together films. You can't argue that. Um, but I think they have the cast power there to be able to get away with spending stupid money on producing these films because they know straight away the people who are in the film is going to be enough to make the money back straight away. Um, and that just is a cash grab franchise. Um, but like I say, when you look at Blade Runner, the fact that they've done 30 years apart or whatever, um, to then produce a film that commercially has not done well, but for the director, that was his baby. He produced a film that he was fucking proud of, and he produced a
Yeah,
film that like was exceptional. And if he gets one top critic, or if he gets more positive reviews than it makes money at the box office, I mean, yeah, it might not do his career very well, but he will be as proud as punch knowing that he's done true and he's ranked true to that franchise.
yeah, and because like you say, that was a justified sequel,
Yeah,
and the fact that it was as good and, in my opinion, better than the original just proves the fact that there was a story there, and if done well with the right cast and the right people
mm,
behind the camera, people who really had a passion and love for the original Blade Runner, then you were going to get something like that. And that's why J49 works so well, because Harrison Ford clearly has passion for this character and this franchise. And the director, Denis Villeneuve, who I believe is one of the best directors working today, he's absolutely phenomenal.
mm,
He's gone on record. He said, "I absolutely love the first Blade Runner. It's one of his favorite films, one of the most influential films for him." And the fact that he got the opportunity to direct it, the sequel, the long-awaited sequel, was a huge moment for him. And he had so much passion that he knew he was going to get it right.
yeah,
Um, and that's exactly it. So I think that'll do it. I think that's our recipe there for a perfect sequel. So yeah, I think it's just, if you are going to do a sequel, you have to make sure you follow all those steps to make your perfect sequel cake, if you will.
yeah. Just don't burn it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this slightly different style video for our channel. Please comment below and tell us what you think. We're hoping to do a few more of these because obviously we covered in our podcast. We're hoping to do one regular format podcast every other Thursday. Um, Obviously to then be uploaded on the weekend by the time you will be watching this. But then we're also wanting to do a couple of these shorter style videos in the meantime. And if you think of any topics you want us to cover, please feel free to follow us on Twitter and let us know there, or comment down below. Thank you again for listening. I've been Nick, and Declan's been Declan.
I have indeed.
Thanks, guys. See you later.
See you.